Welcome back. I hope you've had a chance to make some new connections with the other platform or build on your existing connections. Our next panel discussion is on trackside safety. Over the last 2 centuries, the safety of track workers has increased dramatically. However, there have been a number of fatalities and close misses in the last 3 years. Working on open lines to employees, including the dangers human error and fatigue present. So how do we keep workers safe and continue to lower the risks of hazardous incidents? What are we doing well and what do we perhaps need to improve on? Here with me to drive home the point that everyone who works on the railway deserves to get home safe and to explore how we do it, I'm delighted to introduce Keith Morey, Health and Safety Manager, CDM Lead at Network Rail, Nick Millington, Director of the Safety Task Force at Network Rail, and Dronet, Railways and Channel Sales Manager, Castell and Serv Trayvou, James Nattrass, Director of Incident Management and Operational Security at Network Rail, and Marion Kelly, Head of Transport for London. Don't forget to use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the screen to be included in the conversation, and do share using the hashtag RTM365. So we've got another full house of 5 panelists. And welcome to all my panelists for the second discussion of the day. And Anne, welcome to you. A special welcome to you in that I am familiar with our Network Rail colleagues and Transport for London. But let's start off with a bit about who you are and Castell and Serv Trayvou and what you do.
Well, thank you and good morning to everyone. Serv Trayvou and Castell are actually 2 sister companies belonging to the British holding Alma. And we are actually the creator of the key transfer principle and the oldest manufacturer of such system. STI, through its creator, Mr. Morey, back in 1894, develops a mechanical solution of 2 locks, both with a unique key combination, to prevent train collision on single track traffic, while Castell in 1922 launched a trap key interlocking system to avoid wrong operation in the electrical power station in London. And we now provide global safety solution for depot embedded system on the train, inside the train, for example, also electrical substation, and obviously a trackside object for the personnel.
Fantastic. A lovely introduction there. Keith, I want to go back in time a little bit, if I may. And how has track safety improved over 200 years of the railway? And what's been the biggest change, do you think, worker safety over those 2 centuries?
So one of the biggest things we've seen change is the move away from just normal hats and normal clothing right the way through to full PPE. And you can look back, even just recently, that big change into full orange, which makes you that much more visible. So that's been huge. And of course, now we're seeing more technology being introduced. And I know Nick presses hard for that technology to come across the industry, which helps everybody stay safe.
Gosh, it's such a change, isn't it? Did people in the old days, Keith, did they really just wear normal clothes when they were trackside? I mean, I'm talking decades ago.
Yeah, right up and really until the 1960s. It was only when we saw the end of steam that high visibility even sort of came about. It is interesting that safety boots were probably one of the first, and yet safety helmets have only been within the last sort of 10 years. So
Gosh, that's
it's taken a
amazing,
long time to change.
Let's bring James into the conversation, if we may. James, how are Network Rail supporting track worker safety today?
Well, one of the key things is the implementation of the track safety workforce, but I'm not going to steal Nick's thunder because he knows significantly more about it than I do. So it's really relevant what Keith's been saying, because the railway is this wonderful culture. And for me, it's this really interesting culture of people are dedicated to the railway. You don't quite get anything like the railway family. People have got grandfathers who've worked on it, fathers, mothers, wives, and it's this interesting mix of people dedicated to keeping the surface running, and sometimes at all costs. And what we need to do is work with people around that culture to let them know it's okay to be safe, and don't always take the fact you're used to doing these patterns by rote. It's about ensuring that our workers are competent, and they're modernly competent. And where we got contractors in, we're making sure they're competent, and the sentinels, and just making sure that we can improve it. And fatigue is a really important thing. You know, working on the railway is incredibly inherently dangerous. It's heavy. You're operating in dark and awful conditions. You get very tired. Tired people can make tired decisions. So those are some of the key things that we're sort of looking at to try and help our workforce.
Nick, you've had a good billing so far. Everybody's been mentioning you. No pressure there then. The aim of the task force is to get everyone home safely every day. What have been perhaps the 3 things that you would say would have enabled the significant safety change, and what's been the hardest part for you in delivering that change?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the questions. I guess the 3 things, if I was to pick 3 pieces of advice I'd give to everyone, the railway is full of anecdotes. I've been around quite a long time. I've heard quite a few, and I dare say I'll hear a few more. But the reality of fact is data and analysis. So the first thing we must do is really anchor ourselves to tangible fact. Experience is important. Fact analysis and good decision making based on that is vital. Another thing that's important is engagement with people. You can't change an organisation by hiding away from it. You've got to get out there and get amongst it, and also you've got to be able to have reasonable and challenging conversations. So, I mean, I'm in the Derby delivery unit now, and I have people come up to me and they will challenge me and say, Nick, I don't like this, I don't like that. I've got to take that. But then we've got to be able to engage and explain and take people with you based on engagement. So that's the second thing. The next thing is a really big one and a really important one, and it's leadership will. Leadership will, and when I say leadership will, I mean at an industry level, not only within, for us, Network Rail, but if you look at contractors, if you look at our train operators, if you look at our safety regulators, we need a collective leadership will, otherwise things just do not happen. So that there are the 3 vitally important parts that I would say. In terms of the hardest things, hearts and minds. In order to get people home safe, compromises have to happen. And it may be with rosters, or it may be with new equipment or working practices, or whatever it might be, where you've got to take people with you to do something different than what they're used to. So taking hearts and minds with you is difficult. The railway's got dearly held belief systems. Yeah. How do you change those? So that's really difficult. And something that I think is a challenge for all of us is it is extremely difficult. If you look at and these are all well-intended things, but you put them together and they compound on one another. If you look at how do we quickly and effectively introduce new technology and new safety equipment, when you take into consideration our engineering front door product acceptance, when you look at trials, when you look at the union collective bargaining machinery, when you look at the various constituent parts of the common safety method, and then you look at procurement and public funding and cash by year, it is very difficult to modernize and bring in good safety equipment, technical solutions. So the hardest things, hearts and minds, changing belief systems, and getting up-to-date safety equipment and technology deployed quickly.
God, that's a really full answer there, Nick. Thank you so much for that. And Marianne, welcome to you with 5 panelists. Somebody always has to be last, but certainly not least. I would imagine that a lot of what Nick said will resonate with you. And I'm just wondering whether you can explain to us how London Underground's way of working on track perhaps differs to Network Rail, or, and whether some of the values that Nick talked about there, whilst you're the underground as opposed to overground, whether, you identify with a lot of that, particularly about conversations and winning hearts and minds.
Completely, I couldn't agree more with what Nick has said. We have a different way of working. Most of the access to track on the underground is done during engineering hours. So between, say, 1:30 at night, excuse me, and 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's very different to working in open line railway, particularly during the day. But the principles are the exact same. Particularly what resonated with me was the kind of the technology, the engagement with people, and the leadership will. We've done a lot in the last, we've learned a lot from the terrible accidents that have happened across the UK, and spent a lot of time refocusing our energy on this, including our leadership focus. And before Christmas, myself and our director, who's responsible, director of capital projects and maintenance, spent some time, what we thought was going to be a briefing session with those who were responsible for protecting people on track on the underground. It turned far more into a listening session and really hearing from them what was causing them pain, what was impacting on their ability to work safely and to keep the teams that they protected safe. So that combination of leadership will and really hearing and understanding what is working or not working on the ground is so important. Once you have those two things in place, you can deliver the technology, you can deliver the new ways of working, you can make those changes, but you certainly won't deliver it without the hearts and minds, as Nick said, and the leadership will to drive it through.
And let's go back to you and explore technology a bit more. I mean, Trackside and depots have written operational procedures, and you've got method statements in place for work that's undertaken. But how does integrating your technology enhance safety?
Well, written operation procedures and method statements are an essential part of safe practices in any work environment. But written operation procedures alone, in many cases, should not be the only measure taken to ensure the safety of equipment and personnel. So we work with clients to understand the safety point in the operation, and this enables us to build a solution that meets the needs. For example, using a track key system to enforce set conditions and ensure that they are met. Okay, so we are going to get the process right and make sure it's not bypassed. So we are able to prove the isolation have taken place before permitting the access to an unsafe area, whether it's a trackside or in a depot, for instance. And the system cannot be reversed until the work has been carried out and the key interlock system has been satisfied to put back in normal working state. So we use technologies that have been continually developed for the last 100 years, and we have helped clients to ensure this process in place cannot be bypassed in the energy sector, the industry, even the logistic, and of course the railway.
Keith, we hear, don't we, the digital railways coming. How will that affect track workers' safety, do you think?
Digital railway is a really interesting one. You think back over the years, we've had traditional signalling, which has been around 200 odd years. And then we moved to sort of the LED or the original lights. We're now replacing those when they're 50 odd years old, and we're going to LED lights, which will last a lot longer, stay a lot brighter and a lot easier to see. So digital signalling could be really interesting because you know how quickly your laptop becomes out of date. So is there a whole thing there for having to replace digital work within sort of 20 years as it becomes obsolete? So are the timescales within modern signalling, modern equipment becoming less because it is much more sensitive and just doesn't last as long? So I think it's going to have a huge effect.
A huge effect. I think it is. I'm looking slightly distracted, James, simply because I'm trying to monitor the questions that are coming in from the audience. And I've just spotted one that we were talking about the high-vis vests earlier. And I'm just wondering if you can take this. John Baker says, why does the rail industry standard for high-vis vests no longer include a requirement for entanglement risk? It only talks about the colour and visibility requirements. Several new operators we deal with have been buying vests that don't tear apart if they get caught in something. Is that something that you could tackle for me, James?
Yeah, just
sorry, not
quickly.
James. Sorry, not James. Keith. I was wondering if that was a Keith question. Sorry, Keith. Just because you were talking about the vests earlier, but either of you would be fine.
Well,
Happy with Keith answering that one.
Go on,
Go on then.
I think part of the reason is because we no longer go between trains to uncouple and couple like we used to. So there's a lot less interaction between the stock. So therefore the chances of entanglement are a lot less. Also, the original vests when they came out tended to be buttons. And if you did get caught, then the vest tended to be caught up and dragged along. Whereas now most vests are tear away anyway. So they'll go either that or it's complete body like Nick's wearing, where it's a complete one piece and zips up. So if the clothing's properly secured, the entanglement risk doesn't really exist to the level that it used to. Actually, as I say, with modernising the railways, less coupling and uncoupling because trains tend to be bulk loads.
Thank you for taking that, Keith. James, may I put another question to you that's just popped up from Colin? Colin says, what kind of advanced risk modelling does Network Rail use for analysis of operational risks?
Oh, my word. We have performance analysts. We monitor every incident. One of the functions I manage is the 24/7 National Operations Centre, and that feeds in from all of the route operation controls that report in on all of the incidents that occur. We map them, we measure them, we monitor them, we pass them around, we share experiences around the network. We look for patterns of behaviour, and on the analysis, we produce safety briefs from Alan Spence's safety team when they've done the analysis on what's happened. So we can do live time, we can do longer lessons learned, we can share them. Difficulty sometimes, to be honest, a barrier for us is what we do is we do get the information, we do pass the information, but a lot of our people who are working in the tracks haven't always got ready access to computers. As Nick is down there in Derby today, a lot of the architecture we put them into is not always the best it could be, and they haven't always got access to look at a laptop to do things. So we rely heavily on team briefings. You know, I see Nick laughing there, but it's one of the facts. If we want to sharpen this up, technology is critical to get the data of the lessons learned out to the shift supervisors so they can brief the people at the bottom line. We've got the data, we need to get it to them.
Nick?
I can come in, yeah. So if you look at one of the legacies of what I'm doing at the moment, we are rolling out iDevices, tablets. We're introducing a new, much more articulate planning system called Rail Hub. And what we're doing is ahead of the rollout of Rail Hub, we are rolling out literally thousands of tablets, iDevices. But issuing an iDevice is not a solution in itself. We are also sitting down and training our colleagues to make sure. I mean, I know myself what I've learned with IT. I've had to kind of work it out, and it takes a while. So we've got people sat down helping our colleagues learn how to use iDevices, download the apps, and we're also leaving a legacy. You know, during the pandemic, I've got an 82-year-old auntie that never used a tablet, and during the pandemic, she kept in touch with all of her grandchildren and did her banking on a tablet because she taught herself how to do it. And what we're doing is, as well as rolling out iPads, we're taking our social responsibility and ensuring that our teams that have worked in the road for a long time, many of our colleagues, that when they finally hang up their boots and their orange coats, that they can use emails, banking, online, supermarket shopping, but also, like Jim said, for the meantime, they've got a way of obtaining safe work plans. Also, if you look at digital and media and filming and briefing now, it's not a case of have a look at a PowerPoint, sign the bottom, off you go. They've got icons where they can watch things over and over again, and people, everyone's got a different learning style. So, and the iDevices create a brilliant platform for providing briefing and learning material in a style that suits the individual. So I think it's, we are in a place now where we will have connectivity everywhere.
It is nice hearing you. I was smiling to myself, hearing how you're encouraging everybody to, make good use out of technology. It makes me laugh when my 80-year-old mum's in London and my dad's in Grimsby, and she gets great satisfaction that she can alter the heating on her phone. And so he rings if he's too hot or too cold. So it's great to see, particularly the older generation, really embracing that kind of thing. And Marianne, is it possible that we could completely manage the risk to people trackside with technology, or are there always going to be human factors involved? Oh, we just lost your sound there, Marianne. Oh, there you are. I think you're back.
Back again?
Yeah, you're back. Start again.
It was really interesting listening to Nick reflect on things like tablets. Often when we talk about technology to keep people safe, we, in terms of accessing the track, we're looking at things like devices on the tunnel walls that let people know whether the traction current is on or off. So that is incredible technology, but obviously you want it to be fail-safe, so it takes some time to introduce. Often it's the smaller technology, tablets. One of the things that we realized is tablets can give people, we found that those who were protecting people on track were phones that were too small to read the information. So giving them tablets with more access helps them with that. Giving them Connect radios, which helps them with information. So technology has an important role to play, big picture and small. But the reality is that there's always going to be a human behaviors aspect to it. We, in the past, one of the changes that we've really made in the last year or so is looking at the human behavior for the full picture, not just those accessing track at night, which involves, apologies, which involves our accessing the track at night. We have, it involves our signalers, involves our track access control, and the people who are actually accessing the track. But there's human behaviors as well behind that. Those who are planning the works, booking the access, all of those aspects are a part of the culture change that we need to make. So I think in answer to your question, I think that we can introduce technology that will further reduce the individual decisions that need to be made by people each night. But there will always be an element of human behavior and culture that we will want to influence, both from the start of the plan all the way through to accessing the track at that particular time.
That's a good answer. I'm pleased you've said there'll always be some human interaction somewhere in there. And at what stage in a rail project is it a good time to contact, your experts at STI Castell to discuss safety requirements? Where do you fit into that process?
Well, safety should always be at the forefront of any process creation, because why have a process if the main purpose isn't to keep your workers safe? So contacting us in the initial planning stages ensure that our experts can work with you to talk through your processes, the equipment type, or the environment, and that could drive the decision to ensure the best safety solution is in place right at the start, and comply with the process.
What typical trackside application? What does the trap key interlock solution solve for today? And you can tell by the way I've asked that question, I'm slightly out of my depth here because I'm a general journalist. But if you'd explain in layman's terms for us, and they are terms obviously our rail colleagues will understand better than me.
The typical trackside application for us, there's a link between train movement and maintenance track access. So safety is to isolate the danger. So that's the train movement more generally. So it needs to be done on two levels, communication and physically, in our opinion. So while central operation have a control and oversee the network in real time, it should be normally the entity taking the responsibility of communicating track status to the trackside personnel and eventually train drivers. It also authorizes the access to the trackside when and only when it's free of any danger. For example, we provide what we call a key transmitter device in such situation. So central operation ensure that the track is free of danger and thus send a signal to that trackside object. And the signal authorizes the trackside personnel to take a key out of that key transmitter. And that same key will unlock the access to the track. So more typically can be a turnout, either motorized or manual in some rural or local areas. And the Trackside personnel will insert that key to override the motorization of the turnout, isolating the track section is working on. Okay, and by isolation, it's, let's say, deviating the rail switch direction. And so no incoming trains will come on that section, and no one can change the rail switch if the Trackside personnel have the key.
Oh, and very well explained. Thank you for that. I hope you're not going to test me later, but you did do a very good explanation of that. We only have a couple of minutes left. Quick round, Robin, just to get all the other voices in. Keith, are railways attracting the right calibre of person and are providing the right kind of training, do you think, to work trackside?
I think, especially younger people, the environment they come into is a lot different now from what it was 20 years ago. We do a lot more with apprentices and training. I think part of the thing we have to be is how we manage existing risk and explain that to them. So, we still have problems with things like manual handling, and it's ensuring that they learn the right way and don't pick up bad habits from people who have been there 35, 40 years. People who tend to join the railway tend to stay in the railway. So getting onto those habits and making sure they're learning right at the start is very important.
So embracing the wisdom, but making sure, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes. James, that's a very big question for we've got a tiny amount of time, but future plans to ensure trackside safety with the introduction of GB railways?
Quickly then, certainly culture, picking up on Nick's piece, it's incredibly important. If you use the road vehicle as an analogy, when Keith and I learned how to drive, you didn't have to wear a seatbelt. Now you have to wear seatbelts. You've got airbags, crash testings, lane sensors, anti-locking brakes, surround sound systems. But what you've never modified, because we still have the same number of road crashes, is the person behind the wheel. And that's the sort of analogy. So it's about ensuring that Victorian practices that were great in the Victorian era stop. Horns, whistles, flags, really. The technical solution a colleague made earlier, absolutely spot on. We've got to find that technology. It's about ensuring the standard 091 standard safety principles are done. It's about reviewing maintenance, making sure that when we go on the tracks, we go on as limited as possible, get the maximum amount done. And sometimes that's going to be a paradigm shift in how we operate trains. Because if we need an additional hour to get that safety done to make it safe, sometimes that's just going to happen. At the moment, we're very get back on time, we'll go back and do it later. I think if we're out there, we've got the work, sometimes let's deal with it. Personal view, but I'm not paying the Schedule 8 payments on it. That's where we are. But sometimes we'll get it back now because that's the right and safe thing and start working. I think we could smarten up our professionalisation of it a little bit with that. Understanding.
And just so I don't get shouted at, just in a powerful sentence each, Nick and Marianne, how important is it that the worked? And then London Underground learn from our Network Rail colleagues and vice versa, and that we talk as an industry. Marianne, your sentence first. Don't get me into trouble because I've already run over.
I'd just say incredibly important. We can only learn and gain from each other, and there's no conflict here. We definitely have to work together.
And Nick?
I mentioned earlier about leadership will at an industry level. We've got trains that are armed with technology. We can have a railway that's utterly predictable, that we don't need to put humans in harm's way, and the timetable and the assets are utterly reliable. That leadership will must create that vision as a reality.
Lovely words to end on. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. Thanks very much for some fantastic insights there. Lots of things to digest. Next up, we have Ian Prosser, CBE, Director of Railway Safety at ORR. Ian will be discussing messages from the Chief Inspector Annual Report in the previous year, the challenges of ageing infrastructure in combination with the effects of climate change, and how collaboratively with the industry will improve workforce safety.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Right.
can.
Okay, I'm gonna use track worker safety as a sort of an example as I go through my presentation, picking up bits and then just summarizing it at the end, because it's a topic that actually fits very neatly into the themes that I want the industry to focus on going forward, and has been focusing on in this particular area. And there's some lessons learned from this work to actually cover other areas as we go forward. So next slide, please. So yeah, I'm going to just recap some of the messages from my Chief Inspector's annual report last year and start to socialize some of my emerging areas for focus on the following year. Some of those are the same, but we'll pick up on some nuances on them. An example of track worker safety and how it picks on. That example picks up those themes that I'm actually going to be focusing on across the whole sector, and use it as an example of how we can start to really make significant change and create this paradigm shift that I've just been listening to about culture and about making sure we embed things and actually take people away from risk. Next slide, please. Last year, I focused on the issue of managing climate change and an aging infrastructure, rebuilding passenger numbers through an enhanced experience, and workforce safety, particularly track worker safety. So I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But moving forward, next slide, please. Okay, just to recap, and we've seen a bit of this in the last week or so. One of the areas that we are very focused on, and Network Rail are as well, is that we need to manage drainage as a critical asset for the management of water. We also need to do more about vegetation as well when we have to deal with these storms that we're now experiencing on a fairly regular basis. But we do need to make the best use of technological development in weather prediction, so that we actually don't put watchmen out at risk. You know, we can actually try and use technology to reduce the risk to individuals on an ongoing basis. So we have a stronger operational readiness to minimize disturbances. So in the future, I'd like to see a more, where we're a bit more selective about where we close the railway and on speed restrictions. So using technology, we should be able to try and minimize the disturbances to our passengers. And when we want more people to come back to the railway, we need to try and make sure safely we keep it as open as possible going forward. So the strategic management, as I mentioned, of earthworks and vegetation, including enhanced use of technology in terms of predicting, as Nick was just saying, predicting more about what's happening so that we don't have to put our workforce at risk, and actually also predict and actually manage a better service for our customers. Next slide, please. Because we do need to rebuild passenger numbers through an enhanced experience. So maintaining a high performance and minimizing disruption is going to be critical for that. Well, we did some work before the pandemic, and one of the big issues for passengers had was not so much they took safety as a given, but they were concerned about their own well-being, even before the pandemic, in terms of stress, trains being delayed, they're missing picking up their children from school, etc. And there's going to be also an emphasis on not crowding, not having crowding, with clean trains and stations, and really managing the platform train interface and learning some of the lessons of passenger flows that we've learned during the pandemic. But also one of my big themes, and it does relate to track worker safety, very much so, I believe, is the health and well-being of all. Because if we actually care about our track workers in terms of their management of their health, then we will get greater engagement and show that we're caring. A lot of work has been done, but we've more to do, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Next slide, please. Workforce safety. Last year, I made it very clear that we were supporting the delivery of Network Rail's task force to close out our track worker safety improvement notices, and good progress has been made in the last 12 months, even during the pandemic, towards compliance with those notices. This is a huge piece of work that is fundamentally changing how we do a very key part of our activities on the railways, and actually will shift that safety culture in local teams at the front line. And I'll go through some of the things I feel that has been done that have actually helping to make that happen, because that's critical. We need to improve the safety culture, seek improvements also in depots, which can suffer from the same sort of isolation, if you like, from management, and we need to recover some of that interaction between the frontline and management that has been reduced since the pandemic as we go forward. And I'll talk more about that also later. And as I mentioned, health management is critical, and I'll talk more about that. But I would stress that managing the health of our frontline staff, and Network Rail have done quite a lot of work now in assessing their staff, and it does give a picture of where we really have to deal with a number of issues in terms of the well-being of our frontline staff. And that's going to be critical as we try and make a more efficient and effective railway going forward. Next slide, please. So last year it was focusing, managing for the future, supporting people and technology, and trying to keep it simple, and the message is simple, straightforward and clear. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about what I feel about some of the emerging themes that I'm going to be talking about in my next Chief Inspector's annual report. And a lot of this picks up on a letter that I wrote to the industry, not just the mainline railway, but all duty holders, including heritage and tramways, before Christmas, as I did feel that we were seeing some low-level incidents happen, some quite serious, like Salisbury, where I was concerned that we have some hangover, if you like, from the pandemic. This was my feeling, and a number of people in the industry. That letter was actually well received, but it did say, and its title was focusing on the day job and recovering from the pandemic. And track work is the day job. It is so important for the safety of the passengers and keeping our operations without disruption. And that's why the work that's been going on over the last few years has been critical, I believe, in shifting this industry to the 21st century. Supporting people, that is still to me a really key aspect, and will always be there, of making sure after we start to come out of this pandemic, that we support our people, particularly from a mental health perspective, but also improving the health and well-being of all the people in the industry. The Rail Wellbeing Alliance has been a really good success, and the two events that have taken place during the pandemic have really upped the awareness and the whole awareness of these issues. And we just need to move faster and quicker to actually do some of that going forward. And when I've implementing technology, as I say, quickly and efficiently. I am worried that we take too long in this sector to make quite straightforward improvements that really do benefit both safety, passengers, performance, and efficiency. And we need to move smarter and quicker in a number of areas. And I think the example of Track Worker Safety Task Force has done a lot of this very well, but they even have struggled at times to get through some of the loops. But it needs perseverance sometimes, and Nick in particular shown a lot of that to actually get some of the technology solutions in place. That hasn't always been easy, but we need to find ways in which we reduce some of the blocks that we seem to be, as an industry, conservative with a small c sometimes in introducing technology. And one of the reasons I had to implement the sort of improvement notices on track worker safety was that we had seen various attempts in the past to try and really improve this, but we were still stuck with people waving flags around, using horns and whistles, etc., which really was ridiculous in terms of being in the 21st century in relation to using 19th century tools. So we need to find a way, I believe, in implementing technology quickly and efficiently, because it can really improve the whole operation of the railways. Next slide, please. Focusing on the day job and recovering from the pandemic. This is going to be critical, I believe, in maintaining a safe railway over the next little while. History tells us that after a big shock and a change in some ways in which we've been operating the railway from the norm, like after the Second World War, we did experience sort of a bad period of railway safety. So we need to recover where activity has been reduced levels during the pandemic. We need to look at our resources to make sure that that we cover off people that have actually left the industry during the pandemic. So training, assessment, and management assurance is going to be key to catch up and make sure we have all those things running smoothly as we go forward. One of the areas in which I think there's been a huge push in the Track Worker Safety Task Force has been to actually engage really strongly with the front line, because it's essential, and this has been impacted by the pandemic, to improve connections between the bottom and the top of our organizations. I believe this is really important, that communication needs to be stronger. We can use the technology we've got, but there's nothing like visible presence, and I'll talk about visible leadership more later, because that is really important to actually get those connections that help us change how people feel about who they work for, and improve safety culture going forward. So we must not lose focus on the day job and management at all levels, particularly on frontline assurance. And we have had this message for a number of years, that frontline assurance across the sector needs to improve, so that we manage the financial strains and organizational changes effectively. The industry is going to go through some quite significant changes, not just the mainline railway, but LUL, TfL, and even some of the smaller operators in our portfolio of trams and the like. So there are the financial strains and the organizational changes, but we do need to manage that in an effective way. And as was mentioned earlier, we do need to talk to people about it. We do need to understand the human factors aspects of this and how people feel about some organizational change. So again, communication and managing change well, taking into account and taking people with us, is going to be vital, so that we do, people understand why things are being done. They're engaged properly with how changes are going to be made, introduction of new technology, because everyone at every level can make a real impact in helping improve the way we do things, and feel comfortable with the changes that are being made. So that really does come through some of that strong communication. And I really am pleased to how Nick and his team in the Network Rail Safety Task Force have actively tried to explain and have workshops, etc., with frontline groups, depot groups, to explain why we're doing things and to actually get them on board, and actually see the benefits to them and their colleagues of making these sort of changes. Next slide, please. Supporting our people. As I said, some good progress has really been made on health and well-being over the last 10 years. I remember when I first took this job, I actually had a work stream, created a work stream in my own organization about improving health in the sector. But we had, as a regulator, not focused a great deal on health. We had little resource. So did RSSB. I think RSSB had half a person. And we have really got some momentum now. And the support of John Halsall and people in the Rail Wellbeing Alliance, in RSSB, Michelle, for example, have really made a step change in how people think about health, and the work that has been done in Network Rail, and getting occupational health more aligned to the needs of our employees is really, really impressive. But we need, particularly in the next year, to maintain this, so that we are seen to be looking after each other and caring for each other. By caring for each other, we are going to, the people at the front line will feel they're being cared for. Isolated in the pandemic, but they've been there day in, day out, making sure the railway operated for all the sort of key workers and for freight. And so we need to make sure that we really care for those people by providing the sort of healthcare and health management that they deserve. So building on the success of those conferences, which was superb, and also building on the initiatives like the work we've been doing with the Samaritans, which is world class, in terms of suicide prevention and encouraging things like million-hour challenge. Next slide, please. Implementing technology quickly and effectively. I've mentioned this already. We have an opportunity to actually really make a step change in taking people away from risk and improving customer experience. Technology can improve efficiency in many forms of inspection and in train operation, and we can use the decarbonisation agenda to drive some of this as well. Next slide, please. So finally, the example of track worker safety. I think this is a very good example of how to create change in our sector. The Network Rail Safety Task Force is positively transforming the way we access the track. They've shown strong leadership, visible leadership and governance, which is vital in creating these step changes that actually will make the railway safer for the workforce and the passengers, but also make it more efficient and effective as well. Engagement with the front line and listening and understanding the issues with them. Really, really important, and has been done well, I believe, by this task force. Introducing effective new technology that takes away people from risk and also makes the taking of possessions, etc., and line blocks and all that stuff more effective, and impacting and changing the safety culture. There's been a real effort that it's not just about introducing technology or changing the procedures. It is about impacting that and changing that safety culture. And that's why it's so important that it's done through communicating with the front line, listening to their issues, taking them into account, and creating visible change and making life more effective and better for everyone involved. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. It's always great to have your thoughts, and thank you for linking today with the things that we've been hearing from other guests this morning. Another great session of insightful information shared. Thanks to those who joined me on the virtual stage, and thank you for sending in your contributions. I'm going to have another short break now to re-energize ahead of more great thought-provoking conversations. It's also a perfect opportunity to discover our RTM 365 platform, inclusive of the digital marketplace and on-demand contents, as well as the networking functions you may have used in the first break. So we'll see you for our next session at 11:35.